That little boy, Antonio, got to hear for the first time ever, and he's 5 years old, and he didn't even know that sound existed, and he was just so excited that he thought that that's something that he alone had only, like nobody else could hear sound, only him. And it was really neat to watch him get off the chair and pull his grandma and tell grandma to sit and to put the headphones on, and he was trying to put those headphones on his grandma because he wanted the grandma to experience what he experienced. That is one of the greatest memories I have. There was a young girl, and I forget her name, but she, I believe she had a cyst behind her shoulder, and when she came out of the operating room when they removed the cyst, she was back in the recovery room, and I just remember being there with her, and she was in tears, and she was so scared, and she was in pain, and I just remember being with her and holding her hand, and she grabbed onto my hand and just, looked at me and just thanked me for being there with her, and I think that's the one person that stood out from my experience.
I mean, one little boy I remember very, significantly is, I guess it was a few years back, and he was just a sweet kid, and he wrote us a note before surgery to give to Gary, and he said, please, doctor, give me a smile like all the other kids. And this was a little clump. He was about 8, 9 years old, was really pretty heart-wrenching.
The patient that stood out the most was the little boy who had an enucleation, had his eyeball taken out because they were afraid that dead cancer in the back of his eye. Just because he was, really, he was young, and he was spirited and happy to be there, and his parents really cared about him, and it seemed like that they were really thankful for everything that we were doing there, and so their appreciation and gratefulness was, really touching.
Clearly, my most memorable patient was my very first one, and it's very possible that most of us that go will always remember our first patient. My first patient was a 50-year-old who had had cataracts so dense that for 10 years he had not been able to tell the difference between day and night. And he came from 400 miles away, the other end of Guatemala, where at dinner one evening he had heard about this American team coming to Nuevo Progreso and mentioned to his family that he'd love to go and see the American doctors, but he had no way of getting there. And his 10-year-old grandson said, "Grandpa, I will take you." And as I recall, it was a 7 or 8 day trip. A little bit in the back of pickup trucks, but mostly walking under roads for them to get from the southeastern part of Guatemala to Nuevo Progreso. And I remember when I saw him, he was all cut up, scrapes, bruises. I wasn't really sure that he was really coming even to the eye clinic. He was so battered. And obviously he had fallen many, many, many times on his way, that 400-mile trip. And in fact, his cataracts were, at that time, probably the densest that I ever have seen. I've seen many, many, many more far denser in Guatemala, but never like that here in the United States. We removed one of his cataracts that evening, and the next morning when I took off his bandages, he looked around There was a little smile on his face. You could tell that he could see something. And then he looked down and he saw this little boy looking up at him. And at first you could tell that he wasn't sure who this little boy was until he reached down with his hands and he felt his face. And then we all realized that he had never seen his 10-year-old grandson. And the smile on his face and the tears that streamed down his cheeks when he looked at his grandson and saw him for the first time. That was an experience that none of us in the room would ever forget, and particularly me. And that's the first patient, and there are so many patients like that, that it's the reason that we keep going. I would have thought after 14 or 15 trips that we would have run out of those patients, that they would have all been cared for. But every single trip, we have many, many more just like that.